Voices, freedom, COVID-19. The Four Freedoms Expedition started at King Middle School in 1997 and continues on today. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we, the staff at King Middle School, felt that it would be a great time to hear directly from our students at King Middle School about how their views around freedom have changed or been reinforced due to the pandemic. Students will talk about freedom of worship, shown here in both a contemporary and historic view from Norman Rockwell on the right. Freedom of speech, both contemporary and traditional. Freedom from want, again, a contemporary view and a traditional view. And freedom from fear, both as a contemporary view and as a traditional view. This is the art that started the expedition, and today that expedition has changed, but the voices of our students are still heard.
I chose freedom from want to show limited freedom during the pandemic. During the pandemic, how has your views around the have and have-nots, the rich and poor in the United States changed? The pandemic has changed my views of the rich and poor majorly. In this hard time, a lot of people who have the money to buy masks and other protective equipment for others aren't using it for good, while the very poor people who can't afford to protect themselves aren't able to. How has the pandemic changed your view on what freedom from want means? Before the pandemic, freedom from want meant having basic needs to live a nice life. During the pandemic, a lot of things are added onto that. Freedom from want should include giving medical supplies and protective supplies to people who aren't able to get them themselves. When there are people out there with millions of dollars to spare, it wouldn't affect them horribly to buy masks for the less fortunate. My view on freedom from want has changed a lot since the start of the pandemic. Now, people's basic needs include a lot more than before.
The freedom I chose to show limited freedom during the pandemic is freedom from want. The question I'm going to be answering is, how have your views changed around our healthcare system in the United States? The U.S. is the only developed nation without universal healthcare. Coronavirus patients in the U.S. can have medical bills upwards of thousands of dollars, while people in other countries can get treatment for free. Even people in the U.S. without health insurance may hesitate to get treatment because of deductibles and out-of-pocket costs. Also, it is shown that a large majority of people in the U.S. who are dying from coronavirus are from underprivileged groups who may not have access to the health care they need. I think the amount Americans have to pay for health care is crazy, especially during a pandemic. Personally, I've seen how expensive even the simplest healthcare treatments can get. Therefore, I believe that this pandemic should inspire America to work toward affordable or even free healthcare for everyone. People shouldn't have to decide between their health and a medical bill.
Did you know that most Muslims around the world won't be able to celebrate Eid due to the effect of the coronavirus pandemic? The freedom I chose is freedom of worship. The freedom I chose to show limited freedom during the pandemic is freedom from worship. How has the COVID-19 pandemic changed your view on what freedom of worship means, and how has COVID-19 impacted your freedom of worship? The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted my view of freedom of worship and its true meaning since the pandemic. Since the pandemic, we haven't been able to visit our religious places such as synagogues, churches, and mosques. This pandemic has taught me and millions how precious religion is to us and how it's part of our everyday lives. We are lucky to be in a society that lets us communicate and contact religious leaders and lets people practice their religions from home during this pandemic. COVID-19 has affected my freedom of worship by not being able to celebrate Eid with my family or friends for Eid, or not being able to speak with our local mosque. Eid is a religious holiday celebrated by Muslims all around the world. This pandemic saddens our celebration for Ramadan. The freedom I chose to show that's impacted during this pandemic is freedom from worship. How has this pandemic changed your and impacted your?
Darby DePhilippis, and the freedom that I chose is free speech. The coronavirus has changed my feelings about the spreading of important information by showing me that not everyone is willing to listen to each other. This pandemic likely could have been prevented had there been more communication and less ignorance. It shows that free speech is better left used than unused, only if the person using it knows what they're talking about. Any speech on social media speaks great volumes, so it can spread as much important information as it can misinformation. I know a doctor called Dr. Hal Cohen. He puts a lot of time and effort searching for true facts about health and safety that are essential during the pandemic. He does his best to slow the spread of both the coronavirus and misinformation. Free speech helped him solve a problem caused by free speech. In conclusion, free speech is especially important during this pandemic to stay informed and safe. Free speech has the possibility to bring us both lies and truths, so people affected by this pandemic, we must separate the important information from the misinformation for the sake of our safety and the safety of others.
The freedom that I chose and wanted to explain how it has changed during the pandemic is the freedom from fear. This pandemic has changed my view on what it means to be free from fear. This is because to be free from fear now means that one is protected against COVID-19 and is not fearful of getting the disease. At the beginning of the pandemic, I was worried about getting COVID-19. However, because we are socially distancing and wearing masks, I am no longer as fearful as I once was. For me to feel safe, I need to understand how the virus is spread and fought off. I also need to know the risks and how to be safe. If we all understand the risks and protect ourselves, we can begin to not be fearful of the disease. I believe that the freedom from fear has changed in a monumental way because of the COVID-19 pandemic. How has the freedom from fear changed for you?
Hi, my name is Blaze. I'm a student at King Middle School. The freedom I have selected to show limited freedom during the COVID-19 pandemic is freedom from fear. The two topics I've chosen to speak about is how do I feel the federal and local government is handling the pandemic, and what do I need to know in order to feel safe? What I need to know in order to feel safe is that people in Maine can go back to work, seeing that more than 15,000 people have applied for unemployment benefits, and many more do not have access to the benefits. I feel that the federal and local government should do a better job of making people feel safe during the COVID-19 pandemic by supplying states with funding for state hospitals and testing. So the freedom of fear is the freedom I've chosen to speak about.
The freedom that I'm going to talk about is freedom from fear. The essential question I picked was, how do you feel the federal and local government could do a better job of making people feel safe during the pandemic? First, some people are selling fake cures for the coronavirus, and people who are afraid are wasting their money on something that actually doesn't work. What can our government do so that people don't waste their money on cures that don't work? Also, immigrants are coming to the U.S., but they're being held captive in processing centers, and there's no place to move around or social distance. They're afraid because anybody could have the virus, and they can't stay apart. I've been afraid to go to the stores. I've only been to the store a couple of times since this whole coronavirus thing has started. And you don't know if people in the store have the coronavirus. And what if you touch something that they've already touched? The coronavirus pandemic has taken a lot of people's freedom from fear away. I would like the government to do a better job and make people feel less afraid.
When disaster strikes, people's true selves come out. Mass consumerism and greed all over. Mass consumption of things that are simply not needed en masse. This is all driven by fear. As you can guess, I chose freedom from fear. This pandemic has taken away our good judgment, and common sense is clouded because of the paranoia and fear-mongering this virus has created. For example, domestic assault is on the rise, with the vast majority of victims being children. There has also been large increase in domestic violence in poor or minority populations. In China alone, this past February, they received 3 times more domestic assault calls than at the same time last year. Local governments and healthcare systems have also fallen short, keeping us feeling safe during this crisis. Courts and services are doing a poor job explaining the victims' rights during stay-at-home orders. The healthcare system is limited access emergency services due to the amount of illness caused by the coronavirus, and individuals struggling to get extensions and protection orders from their abusers during this time. Mental health issues are also a major concern now more than ever. A recent study has shown that people are 8 times more likely to screen positive for mental health issues such as depression than they were a year ago. Surprisingly, young adults experience 10 times more distress than in older generations, and calls mental health lines have surged worldwide. As you can see, this chaos we have been thrown into has not only affected people's physical state, but also the state of their households and emotional health. I have been talking to a friend about how scared everyone is during this time with no end in sight. As a global community, we can agree on one thing. Everyone will be affected by this pandemic in some way. No matter how rich, rural, or how many resources you have, everyone is still fearful of the pandemic.
Did you know during this pandemic, not everyone can get the healthcare that they want? The freedom from want has been compromised due to COVID-19 pandemic. It's freedom of want. One reason I selected freedom from want is COVID-19 has changed my view on what freedom from want means, by us not being able to do what we want. For example, we can't see our friends. My friends are important to me and make me happy to hang out together, laugh, or just shoot some hoops. My views changed around our healthcare systems in the United States. There are a lot of people going into hospitals, and some people can't even get the help that they need. The healthcare workers have been putting themselves at risk, have been working hard to help others. Are we protecting healthcare workers? Is the personal protective equipment being replaced enough to be protective? In conclusion, these are the reasons I think freedom from want goes the most with COVID-19. People want safe and healthy environment.
What could our government have done or do now to better prevent the spread of the pandemic? The freedom that I chose to show restricted during this pandemic is freedom from fear. How do I think the federal and local government could do a better job making everyone feel safe? First, in order to accurately keep track of the pandemic's movements, we need to be doing around 30 million tests per week, but we're only currently doing 1 million. Along with that, Larry Hagan states that the president said that the governors are on their own and they should really focus on getting their own tests. The top thing that I believe the government could do is to provide more testing kits and to do a better job testing. What do I need to know to feel safe? In order for me to feel safe, I'd want to know a few things. First, the best way to prevent the spread of the infection. Secondly, I'd want to know what is happening elsewhere in the world, what people are doing to prevent or to fight the pandemic. Third and final, I'd want access to everything I would need to stay healthy and safe. For example, water, food, and a house. A quick side fact is that oil prices have been in free fall since the onset of coronavirus crisis, as supply extensively suppresses demand. In conclusion, those are the reasons, facts, and statements about the freedom from fear, and more closely, the coronavirus.
Hi. So, did you know that freedom from want has been taken away severely during this pandemic? Yes, you're probably realizing this now. The freedom that I chose to show freedom has been limited during this pandemic is freedom from want. The questions I chose to answer are: how has the COVID-19 pandemic changed your view on what freedom from want means? And how have your views around our healthcare system in the United States changed since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic? This COVID-19 pandemic has changed my view on what freedom from want means extremely. This pandemic has actually made me realize that freedom from want was a huge problem back in the day and is coming along with this pandemic. The want factor has been taken away severely as people have to follow the rules by their government to stay safe, but with doing that, many freedoms such as freedom from want have been taken away without people realizing it. The coronavirus has caused many restrictions on freedom from want and assembly to happen. Countries have been going far beyond this as they are restricting people's state of being free. My views around the healthcare system in the United States have changed very much since this pandemic has hit. The healthcare systems are now very overwhelmed with people trying to get tests and people who are sick. I never really pointed out our healthcare workers and what they do for us until this pandemic. They have saved many lives and are working their hardest, as I hear from the news and the people around me. We should all try our hardest to stay safe and not get sick so the healthcare systems don't have to deal with more people, as they have already had to deal with enough.
So overall, freedom from want is a great freedom to think about during this pandemic, as many things around freedom from want have been limited. How has your freedom from want been limited? Think about that. Thank you.
You know that the coronavirus is affecting people living in poverty the hardest? The freedom I chose to talk about is freedom from want. The questions I will be answering are, how is the coronavirus affecting people living in poverty, and what are some ways we can help them? The coronavirus has been affecting them because they don't have somewhere to stay or an option during this pandemic. They can't follow the rules of social distancing or staying home. They might not know the rules during this pandemic because they don't have a television, a phone, or a radio. They also don't have a home to stay home to. Some ways we could help people are handing out masks to them, also mini mags with hand sanitizer, gloves, masks, and much more. Those questions show why I chose to talk about freedom from want.
Hi, the freedom I chose to show limited freedom during the pandemic is freedom from fear. My understanding of fear and freedom from fear has changed since the pandemic started. At first, I thought fear included violence, but now I believe that fear is all about not understanding something and having no control over it. The COVID-19 pandemic changed my view on what fear is. We all have fear of something, and we also fear what we don't understand or have no control over it. I didn't think coronavirus was going to come this far. Over millions have died through this virus in this world. People are afraid to lose their relatives or get affected by it. We're all afraid that the fact that we don't have any control over this virus is my biggest fear. We can't do anything except being apart from each other, reduce the risks of catching coronavirus. My view on freedom from fear has changed over the pandemic. We're all afraid, but we'll all also get through this. We should keep ourselves healthy and well. The last question is, what can we do to clear out our fear thoughts of coronavirus?
The freedom I chose to talk about is freedom from fear. In order to feel safe and stay safe, you should be cautious when you go anywhere that involves people around you, like a grocery store. You should wear gloves if you have any, and a mask. For example, if people start wearing gloves, the virus wouldn't spread to our hands and then spread to our mouths if we touch them. The federal government and the local government could do a better job with lifting bans. They should give it more time. Cases should drop significantly before they start opening things. The government should not worry much about the economy. They should care more about people's health. For example, when quarantine started, it started to slow down a little. Then things started to open up, and more cases were reported. According to the CDC, washing your hands with soap and water is more efficient than hand sanitizer. In conclusion, people and the government should do a better job in this pandemic, for our own safety and for others. Do you think this is going to end soon if we don't start social distancing?
My name is Paul Clifford. I'm a teacher at King Middle School, and I'm here to help a friend of mine out, one of my students, with his video. So you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Douglas, and I'm an 8th grader at King Middle School. And my freedom is freedom from fear, because I like to take care of everyone.
So you're living at home, and you wanted to talk about how you want to protect your family. Is there anybody at home that you particularly want to protect, that you're a little worried about?
I worry about my grandma because she's really old and she's not doing really good in health, and it would be really sad and actually break my heart if she gets it, because it's really bad.
And I know there's some younger folks at your house too, right?
Yeah, I have a little brother. He's 5. He plays around. I take him outside for like at least 10 minutes because he likes to run around.
Mm-hmm.
And we usually wash our hands when we come back.
That's smart. What else do you do to protect your family other than wash your hands?
I told my mom when she goes to work to at least wear a mask or gloves, and when she comes home to like use hand sanitizer for a bit and then wash your hands.
Awesome. How about social distancing? You guys been practicing that as well?
Yeah, me and my mom don't usually go out, so we usually stay in the house.
Well, I know that it's been a big change. Have you missed school much?
Yeah, I've been missing school, like teachers, lunch with my friends, everyone. It's really depressing being home.
Well, thanks for talking to me about this, Douglas. I really appreciate it. And I know that you're doing a great job of keeping your family safe, and that's awesome. So we'll be talking to you soon.
All right, thank you.